What's up everyone, and welcome back to the MMA Zone. Today let's get started with DC saying the UFC should give Conor McGregor a tune-up fight upon his return. With Conor McGregor set to return to the octagon this year, there have been few in the media who stated that it might be best for Conor to get a tune-up fight before he jumps in there with the elite of the elite once again. Conor McGregor hasn't fought since he sustained a broken leg injury back in July of last year in a trilogy bout against Dustin Poirier. By the time he returns to the cage, it would most likely have been at least a year since he last fought, perhaps even more. Add to that the fact that he has won only one of his last 4 fights dating back to 2018, and you can see why some people, like Joe Rogan, stated that the UFC should probably give Conor an opponent whom he can shake the cobwebs off against. Former champ Daniel Cormier believes that this is the way, and stated as such in a recent episode of the DC and RC show on ESPN. This is what he said in relation to that.
I absolutely tap in on Conor needing a tune-up. It just has to be the right name for that tune-up fight that would allow for the company to still sell a boatload of pay-per-views and Conor to look good enough to warrant that next fight that is massive.
DC goes on to talk about how this happened when Conor fought Cowboy Cerrone in early 2020. When that fight took place, it had been about 15 months since he had last stepped in the octagon, tapping out to Khabib Nurmagomedov in a lightweight title fight. Conor smoked Cowboy in just 40 seconds via TKO. This pay-per-view had 1 million buys. Following that fight, after the coronavirus fiasco, Conor got the big name in Poirier. Do you agree that Conor should have a tune-up fight when he gets back in the octagon later this year? Over a month after the physical altercation outside of a Miami Beach steakhouse, both Jorge Masvidal and Colby Covington appeared in court via Zoom, and Covington was officially named as the victim. Masvidal, who pleaded not guilty last month to charges of aggravated battery and criminal mischief, he was ordered to stay at least 25 feet away from Covington and prohibited from contacting him directly or indirectly. Covington did admit to being fearful of another attack from Jorge Masvidal. Meanwhile, new reports say that Covington is saying that he suffered brain damage as a result of Masvidal's strike. What are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments. GSP praises Khamzat Chimaev over a win against Burns, but says he's got to game plan more. Khamzat Chimaev has been on a tear pretty much his entire career, and at UFC 273, he was given his biggest test to date, a battle against former title challenger and number 2 ranked welterweight at the time, Gilbert Burns. The fight was an incredible war, and after 15 minutes, Khamzat came away with the unanimous decision victory. While Burns' stock truly rose higher with this victory, he and his coaches stated that he didn't follow the game plan and that he should have been smarter. Still, the fight was a massive test that saw Khamzat show he belonged with the elite of the welterweight division. One former welterweight champion who saw a lot of promise in Khamzat is George St. Pierre. The MMA legend praised Khamzat for his toughness and ability to overcome challenges. He believes that going through this type of fight, through the adversity, especially while carrying the confidence of an undefeated finishing streak, is essential to grow and evolve as a fighter. But GSP also believes that he needs to shape up his tactics and take that next step in his fight IQ to be able to stay at the top and fight the best of the best and win. In a recent interview with James Lynch, this is what GSP had to say.
So I think it was a good fight for him. I mean, it's not good to get hit in the head. And I don't think I like to watch him fight, but I don't think he fought the smartest fight. I think he could have made it easier for himself if he would have, I think he's just used to go through everybody like this, but you can't fight like this at the elite level. You need to prepare, to game plan.
It's unclear what's next for Khamzat. As UFC President Dana White stated before the Burns fight, he wanted to see Khamzat take on Colby if he walked away with the W. Then after the fight, White reiterated those words. But some in the media, including Chael Sonnen, doubt that this will actually take place. Still, what do you make of GSP's comments? Do you think Khamzat needs to make it easier on himself in these fights and stick to his game plan to fight the best? Eddie Hearn questions whether Tyson Fury will actually fight Francis Ngannou. Well-known boxing promoter Eddie Hearn is not really sure if this Tyson Fury-Francis Ngannou crossover boxing match will actually become real, no matter how hard both fighters try to make it so. The combat sports world went in a tizzy last weekend as Tyson Fury and Francis Ngannou gave a post-fight interview together following Fury's knockout of Dillian Whyte at Wembley Stadium for the WBC heavyweight title. Both men confirmed their interest in having this crossover boxing match, most likely with small gloves, perhaps as early as next year after Ngannou heals up from knee surgery. Fury has also stated in the past that this win over White will likely be his last and was looking forward to retirement, which actually would allow him to consider fights like those against the UFC heavyweight champion. But Hearn believes that Fury is not going to retire, nor should he, given that there's still the Anthony Johnson bout and or the Alexander Usyk fight that could enhance Fury's legacy. Beyond that, Hearn was also asked this week by Ariel Helwani what he thought about a potential fight between Fury and Ngannou. This is what he said.
It's a big fight, you know, I mean, I don't know the contractual situation. I think Tyson Fury's up with ESPN or about to be, and Ngannou's up with the UFC. Maybe Dana comes in and does it himself, you know, maybe I do it with Dana, or maybe, I don't know.
Hearn states that this fight would be massive, but he doubts that Dana White would work with Bob Arum to make this happen, and whether Ngannou could negotiate something that would allow him to do this fight while still under contract with the UFC. Do you agree with Hearn that this fight likely won't take place, or are you confident that this Fury-Ngannou boxing match will happen? Don't forget to take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to the MMA Zone to stay up to date on the latest fight news. Canelo Alvarez and Kamaru Usman exchange public words in call-out. Kamaru Usman and Canelo Alvarez had some words on social media, and it all started with Usman's hype man and manager, Ali Abdelaziz, making some disparaging words towards the Mexican champion. Like a wrestling promoter, Abdelaziz used his fast Twitter fingers to trash talk Canelo, calling him a chicken and saying he's ducking the UFC welterweight champion, who has called out Canelo for a boxing match. That's when Canelo responded to this tweet by dismissing Ali. Who the f is this? That's when Usman saw an opening to speak to the boxing champ and stepped out of the shadows to say this: "Let's just relax before somebody gets hurt." Canelo then responded to Usman with, "I agree, because it will not be me." Then Usman issued a challenge on Twitter and said this: "In the cage or the ring, I'm willing to find out in both. Are you?" To which Canelo then kind of accepted but told him to wait his turn. "You calling me out, right? You want the payday, right? So you know where. But sit down, it's not your turn yet. I have a legacy to make." Usman has been challenging Canelo for a boxing match sometime later this year, despite the fact that he has a broken hand and is slated to defend his title against Leon Edwards this year too. Even UFC President Dana White stated, "This fight was silly and didn't want to waste time on it." What do you make of this whole exchange? The UFC has suspended fighter Miles Johns after he tested positive for a banned substance. The 28-year-old bantamweight is going to be out for 6 months due to the positive drug test. What do you think about this? Yancy Medeiros says Nate Diaz needs UFC to release him. Nate Diaz has just one fight left on his current UFC contract, and he's repeatedly stated that he wants to fight it out, most likely against Dustin Poirier, and then leave the promotion, possibly to retire. Diaz has used the R word, although many in the media believe he just wants to be a free agent and make more money elsewhere. That's also the thinking behind Yancy Medeiros' words. Medeiros, who recently signed a multi-fight deal with Bellator after he beat Emmanuel Sanchez at Bellator 279 on short notice, he's been a training partner and friend of Diaz's for several years now. Medeiros trains with Diaz in Stockton, California, whenever he's not in his native Hawaii, and in a recent interview with Ariel Helwani, he relayed what would be best for Diaz. In Medeiros' mind, the best thing for Nate Diaz would be if the UFC released him. This is what he had to say about that.
I think you can connect the dots, bro. Yes. Why UFC doesn't want to, let him go. But I feel that the biggest thing for right now that could ever happen for Nate is if he was released to UFC, because that man knows his brand, he knows his work, and there's a lot of people that want to invest in him and make him rich, more rich.
It's unclear what the holdup is in terms of scheduling Nate Diaz for his last fight on his UFC deal. One theory is that the UFC might want him to fight Conor McGregor in a trilogy bout upon the Irishman's return from injury later this year. But Diaz is, reportedly, not open to that bout, and has openly stated that he wants to fight Poirier or some other undisclosed names. Just a month ago, Poirier himself stated that he was told Diaz passed on him and decided to retire instead. Perhaps Diaz and the UFC are actually much further apart than what they're letting on. Nate Diaz has been in the fight game a long time and understands how much power he has as a fighter, or lack thereof. And so, stating he wants to retire may or may not be a tactic to get the UFC to negotiate a new deal with more money, or simply give him the fight he wants and let him walk. But what do you think about Medeiros' comments here? And do you feel we've seen the last of Nate Diaz in the octagon? Thank you so much for joining us today. What do you make of what's going on in the fight world? Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date on all the latest news from the MMA Zone. See you next time.